Imagine with me for a moment. It's almost the year 1800. As a youth, your world is developing rapidly, and as a new day breaks, your senses are greeted in the following way. From his bedroom window overlooking the waterfront, young Samuel was a spectator of the seafaring world. Here, merchant ships and men of war swung at anchor or tied up at one of the many wharves that reached out from the shores of Halifax's magnificent ice-free harbor. The Royal Navy dockyard was located just to the north of the Cunard property. Samuel's earliest memories were the sights and sounds of the waterfront. Almost daily, he would have awoken to see a forest of different sized masts. His other senses would have taken in the smell of the hemp, oakum, tar, and drying canvas, and the sounds of block and tackle, the hammer, the adze, the blacksmith anvil, and always the living sounds of the vessels themselves as they creaked and groaned with the movement of the water beneath their keels. No vessel entering the harbor caused greater interest than packet boats arriving from England. They brought the mails and newspapers containing news from Europe and the outside world, which was quickly reproduced in the local weekly newspapers. This powerful scene is the landscape that I believe seeps into the subconscious of Samuel Cunard, and it propels him deeply into business from the age of 10 until the day he dies more than 65 years later. His reputation for building safe, durable, and reliable ships is the sole foundation that enabled the Cunard Line to become one of the world's oldest continuously operating shipping lines with more than 185 years of service to date. This, my friend, is a remarkable story of a life well lived, and it comes from the book that I'd like to talk to you today about, which is called Steam Lion, a biography of Samuel Cunard that was written by John G. Langley. In our modern world today, so many people are seeking to be the next Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, or perhaps Bill Gates, or any of the other high profile CEOs and founders that we see so constantly on the news. They're chasing big fortunes and quick riches, and you often hear founders talking about their exit strategy before they even get off the ground. Amongst all this noise, we can find solace and take a step back and turn our focus on great founders and entrepreneurs from the past that were deeply driven to live their passions. Put in long hours of work each day, they stayed the course and built enduring companies by simply following their purpose in life. For them, work just turned into play. These are the foundational warriors that we should be allowing to guide us. Those like Samuel Cunard, who was not overly charismatic. He lacked flashy clothing and he ditched his ego. Instead, he focused on hiring the proper lieutenants. He worked on the front lines, inspecting his ships as they were being built, and then also during their operational lives. His ships were classic in nature. They weren't fancy and they weren't built for speed. He crafted them for reliability and durability. In short, to simplify things down, Samuel Cunard trusted the compounding power of being on time. This was his number one cornerstone in life. For him, it was everything, being on time. And this compounded from the time that he was a youth all the way through until the end of his life. And it snowballed along the way, getting bigger and bigger as he won bigger and bigger contracts and expanded his fleet. It's this discipline that compounds and it turns his company into a long-standing institution that still exists to this day. And this is a story that I'm really excited to share with you today. Possibly this is the first time you've heard of Samuel Cunard, and I hope by the end of the episode, you'll have a good feel of who he was, what made him deeply driven, the principles he used to build his business, and most of all, you'll take a few lessons away that you can actually use in your own personal business or your personal life. Before we get started, I just wanted to welcome you to the show today. On the podcast, you and I have the chance to talk about great entrepreneurs from business history. and I share some of the most valuable lessons from the books that we cover. For each episode, I read a new book, which today's book is kind of short. I think it was like 135 pages. So that's about 5 hours of reading for me. And then I take tons of notes along the way, and I distill those down into a show outline, which normally takes just as long to compile as it does to read the book. So that's like another 5 hours. For this episode, I did some extra research on Cunard, say maybe 3 hours to do that research. And then after that, I review the outline 2 or 3 times. I record the podcast and edit it down. So that's another 2 to 3 hours. So for this one episode today, I have maybe about 15 to 17 hours of work into it, all in all, by the time you add everything up, which is actually on the shorter side of episodes that I normally produce. I would say most of the times they're probably more in the 35 to 40 hour range just for an episode. And for me, it's just an incredibly enjoyable process, and I really feel lucky that I can share it with you. I find that it greatly enhances my learning process. In addition, my memory retention. In the past, I was just banging through books. I'd read a book, put it on the shelf, go to the next one. And 2 years later, I would look at the book and I could only remember a few things. But by going through this process of outlining, recording the podcast, editing it, and putting it out there for the world, it actually helps me focus and retain more information. And at the same time, I see it as a service for you, my friend, for something that you might be able to pick up and take away and use in your business as well. Some of these valuable lessons that you and I talk about. If you did find some value in the episode today, maybe you could just do me a quick favor and leave me a review or some feedback on your favorite podcast player. I would greatly appreciate that. And that would help me out a great deal. I'm new here and I'm just trying to get things off the ground and started. So any feedback that you have would be highly appreciative, and I thank you in advance. The show is 100% ad-free, and if you do like the books and you use the link in the show notes to purchase one of them, I'm going to be donating 100% of that affiliate revenue to help support children's literacy, which is a cause that I firmly believe in. Speaking of books, this book, Steamline, is an excellent book for your library. It's a quick read, but it gives you the perfect insight into Samuel Cunard's life. Plus, it'll give you all the details, as the show here is just focused on the major lessons from each of the books that you and I talk about. This is why I always recommend picking up a copy of the book if you can. With that, how about we jump in our Wayback Machine and we're going to head back to Wednesday, November 21st, 1787. Where we find ourselves this week in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where Samuel Cunard was born to Abraham and Margaret Cunard. He was the second of 9 children, and in the book it says that he was born with salt in his veins, which I think is absolutely correct. You see, the family home, as we heard at the opening, was just spitting distance from the harbor. His parents, they were British loyalists who had immigrated to Halifax in 1783 from Philadelphia during the American Revolution. While many loyalists would struggle to find shelter and work, Abraham Cunard, he was a skilled carpenter, and he was fortunate to acquire a prime lot of land by the water, and what he would do is he would build a 2-story home there for the family. He was able to easily find work in Halifax's building homes as the city was growing quite rapidly with all of the British loyalists that were fleeing from the United States. During Samuel's early years, he was heavily influenced by his father as he observed how skilled he was at his business dealings. His father is going to start acquiring more and more land, which would lead him to start harvesting timber. And a large portion of the timber at the time went into building ships. So naturally, he would drift towards building and acquiring his own ships over time. And along with that, he also focuses on building out the Cunard Wharf and his storage warehouses that were located right by the wharf. This environment is going to become Samuel's trading ground. Along with building a strong business in the community, his father and mother, they're going to build strong connections in Halifax with the loyalist community. This played a really big role in Samuel's life as he's growing up because this enables him to feel those strong bonds of connection with Britain. As we'll see later on in the show, he would actually spend a lot of time there making deals to help build his steamships, and eventually he would move there and pass away there. So at this really early age, his eyes, they're really wide open to his surroundings. And we can see that his father is working really hard. He feels the social connections amongst the communities in which they are rooted here in Halifax. It's not going to take him very long to start making his own way in business. And let's just jump into the book and take a first look at how deeply driven Samuel was at just the age of 10. He soon learned his way around the waterfront, and it wasn't long before he engaged in his first business initiative, gathering up remnants from broken lots of dry goods and packaging and reselling them at a profit. The Halifax piers were his training grounds. The experience he gained there would shape his character. At this very early age, he's really crafting his work ethic and he's developing his business skills. This is something that we see in so many of the great entrepreneurs that we study on the show. For example, Sam Walton and Ed Thorpe both learned to service customers through their paper routes. Henry Ford, he helped his neighbors with mechanical issues, developing his skills and building a solid reputation. Elon Musk coded and sold video games at the age of just 12. And right here, it's the same for Samuel Cunard. He follows his father's hard work ethic. And in the next section from the book, I think this is really the first view that you and I get into his deeply driven nature that's going to propel Samuel forward for the duration of his life. Let me just read for you here. As a boy, Samuel was rather unremarkable in appearance, but what he lacked physically, he more than made up for in energy and initiative. From his early childhood, he was never known to waste a single moment of the day. He was born with ambition and an unbending will to succeed, regardless of the task. Before he had become a teenager, Samuel had already developed business skills beyond his years through his enterprise to sell remnants of lots on the waterfront. His boyhood experience of buying, selling, and marketing of commodities, however small, gave him the confidence that would be the hallmark of his success in the years to come. One sentence really stood out for me here. He was born with ambition and an unbending success, regardless of the task. I just love that particular sentence right there. This is the fire inside. And if I just read it again, he was born with ambition and an unbending will to succeed, regardless of the task. I really believe that Samuel would have excelled at just about anything that he chose to do in life. His environment in this instance is going to be his ultimate guide. Samuel, he was a heavy observer of all things around him, much like how Sam Walton was a keen observer of how his competition conducted business, and he used those high quality ideas to strengthen and grow his own business. When Sam Walton first started out, a lot of his stores were very basic in nature and barely put together. And what he would do is he would go out and he would seek out the best ideas from his competition and then integrate that into his stores. And over time, they got better and better and better. It took him 5 years to get his first store in Newport, Arkansas, from barely breaking even. I think they were making something like $70,000 a year in sales. To 5 years later, they were doing $250,000 in sales. But it really took him that amount of time to learn. In Sam Walton's book, Made in America, which is his autobiography, he actually thanks Kmart for all of the innovative ideas that he got from them that he would implement in his own store. For Samuel Cunard, he applies that exact same philosophy just 150 years before Sam Walton did it. And this, my friend, is really an important concept to keep in mind as we move forward here. Samuel, like Sam Walton, would derive success by observation, experimentation, application, and expansion. He really understood from a young age that he had to start slow in order to go fast. Now, as Samuel's growing, he really understood that it was important to be engaged with the community as well. And at the age of 21, he's going to become the president of the Sun Fire Company, where he would make decisions about how to put out fires. He would also make decisions about what structures in the community might be a fire hazard and potentially had to be torn down. And then he also oversees the placement of various wells that needed to be sunk around the community so that his crews could have access to water during emergencies. Through these efforts, Sam learned a great deal about fire. And later on in life, as he's building out the Cunard line, he would actually place a lot of emphasis on how to properly protect his wooden ships from fire. Safety was always his top priority, where most of the other shipbuilders and the owners of these ships would often overlook these aspects and place them at a lower value. Not for Cunard. He took the extra time, but that was time well spent because, as we just mentioned a minute ago, he really knew that by going slow, building your fleet one ship at a time, you could eventually go fast as his reputation for safety and reliability grew along with his physical fleet size. And guess what? He wasn't losing ships due to fire. The takeaway here is go slow to go fast. Cunard, he understood this from an early age, and it gives him a great deal of leverage later on in life. And I think this is something that we can learn from Samuel, to take your time to build things out slowly and with care. Put quality into your work and understand the process. Once you have a feel for the flow, then we can start producing our high quality goods or replicating our services with a little bit more speed. And this is going to compound over time, and it's going to gain us a solid reputation in much the same way as it did for Samuel Cunard. One thing that Henry Ford said that I really love, he said, "Quality means doing it right when no one is looking." And this really describes Cunard perfectly because he was adamant about quality. This was something that his father saw and admired in young Samuel, and together they're going to go into business under the name A. Cunard and Sons in 1812 so that they could engage primarily in the timber trade, as their land holdings had increased quite a bit during this time to thousands of acres. Then in addition, they're going to also begin engaging in trade with the West Indies. Shortly after they get this business off the ground, the War of 1812 is going to break out. And as a result, Canadian merchants are going to be faced with an embargo of goods from the United States. However, a few merchants are going to be granted licenses that are going to allow them to continue to trade. And Samuel, with his good reputation, is going to be one of those merchants who would receive one of those very few limited licenses. As a result, he's going to fill up his warehouses with goods such as spirits, molasses, brown sugar, coffee, and tea from the Indies. It says in the book they would also acquire their first full rigged ship, which was called the White Oak. And things right here for Cunard, they're really looking up. He's going to meet his wife around this time. They would be married in February of 1815, and together they're going to have 9 kids. Samuel would construct a modest 4-story home for the family in Halifax shortly after they had gotten married. And business was really good, and it says the following in the book. A. Cunard and Sons was found and prospered under Samuel's energy, reliability, and good reputation. Born with a strong work ethic, he was customarily at the wharves before dawn each day, buying cargoes from the West Indies, and also brought in under government license from the United States until peace came in 1815. The foundation had been laid for a company that would capture the imagination of the world. And the keyword foundation was absolutely correct. You see, around this time, he's going to start picking up British mail in the UK-controlled territory of Bermuda and transporting it back to Halifax. This had 2 major impacts for Samuel. First, it gave him the opportunity to become familiar with the carriage of mails, and it gave him the chance to meet authorities that were connected with the British mail service. And then second, is he gained a solid reputation for steady, reliable service with the Home Office back in England. This was really a big deal at the time. This concept, that of a compounding power, of being on time, this is a huge deal, and it really compounds for Samuel. And right here, it's starting to gain a little bit of momentum. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It's starting to pick up just a little bit of speed. And as it grew, he's going to soon dedicate two ships, the Susan and the Emily. They're going to be contracted by the British to carry mail both ways between Bermuda and Halifax. This was his first official mail contract. Samuel's going to continue to build his reputation for being on time, and it's going to gain him additional contracts to deliver mail into Boston a few years later, and this greatly increases his revenues into his company. And one thing that we have to keep in mind here at this point in history is that the telegraph was still under development. It's going to be 5 more years before Samuel Morse would devise a practical system in 1837, and then another 10 years for it to start becoming more commonplace. So Samuel has about a 15-year period of time here, which he can capitalize on delivering the mail in a reliable and an on-time fashion, and he's just going to enjoy the benefits of this compounding effect over this period of time. So the written word right here, this was the primary way to conduct business. The unscheduled and the erratic arrival of the mail from Britain and its territories often took weeks or months, especially those that were crossing the Atlantic. And when they did arrive, there was often a great anticipation for receiving the mail and the news to see what was going on. Now just imagine for a second that you had sent a business letter and it took 12 weeks to be delivered to England from Canada or the United States. And then it took 12 weeks to get a reply. I mean, basically you're looking at a half a year to really get anything done. And that was just the way of life at the time. Now, along comes Samuel Cunard, who's delivering the mail reliably and timely between Bermuda and Halifax. The compounding snowball is growing and growing over time here. And as described in the book, Samuel, he was a very keen observer, and he was already thinking about how he can improve upon the situation, especially with transport across the Atlantic Ocean. As he's mulling this over in his mind, he continues to expand his fleet of ships under his father's watch. As they were buying used ships at auction, and then they would fix them up and resell them. Basically, they were flipping ships, if you will. And for the first time, they also started to contract out the building of their own ships. And this would have a major impact for Samuel in the long run. And it gave him a few major benefits and learnings right here. The first is that he learned the builders and the engineers in the industry who were reliable and who did good work. And then also he learned who to avoid. Then second, he let his reputation be known to others. That is a man of his word, a man who spoke directly and with clear language about what he expected without any confusion. These are really key elements for you and I that we can learn from Samuel here, that of building solid relationships, those that he would keep over the duration of a lifetime. In the book, it says that he almost never argued with anyone, and he had very few instances of falling out with business associates. Relationships are everything, and we should always invest heavily in developing and nurturing them. Then the second item was that of clear communication with his contractors and those that worked for him. As we've spoke about so many times in the past, for example, in the last episode, we spoke about Herb Kelleher and how insistent he was about communication, and more communication with his employees. He wanted to give them the state of the business, make sure they understood what their goals were, and how important and how loved they were to the organization. This helped him turn Southwest Airlines culture into a family, which is extremely difficult to do in an organization, but it is accomplishable with relationships and communication. This is what Samuel Cunard did. He built relationships on both sides of the ocean and he communicated clearly. Another major trait of Samuel, we've mentioned this a little bit already, was his ability of observation. As he's acquiring and building ships, he starts to take notice of a new and innovative technology that was starting to become prominent in the shipping industry, in that of steam. Although it would take him many years before he would start using this technology in his own fleet, his company is going to continue to grow. And with time, his father is going to retire in 1920. This would see Samuel dissolve A. Cunard and Sons and form his own company, S. Cunard and Company, in 1824, which would hold large tracts of land in Nova Scotia and the surrounding areas that had been inherited from his father Abraham. And then his fleet would continue to grow with more than 45 sailing vessels up to this point. Those inbound shipments are going to fill up his newly constructed 4-story warehouse on the wharf with trade goods. Ships going outbound to the Indies would be full of fish and timber, and those coming inbound had a constant flow of sugar, rum, molasses, and coffee, and most importantly, that of tea. And why was tea the most important? Good question here. You see, Cunard had learned that the East India Company, who controlled the trade with China, was considering opening a route from China to Quebec. Instead of relying upon unreliable letters to try to win this business, Samuel, he's going to immediately board a ship for London to meet with the East India Company. And he's going to convince them that shipping to Quebec was a bad idea due to the harsh winds and the seasonal ice in the area, and that Halifax would indeed be a better option as their ports were ice-free year-round, and then he had the wharves and the warehouses to sell the tea at auction on their behalf. Let's just jump into the book here. I wanted to just read a few selections so that you could get a feel of how this worked out. After 5 months in London negotiating with East India Company officials, Cunard successfully secured the agency for the delivery of tea directly to Nova Scotia with the Prize Tea Agency, which Cunard retained for the next 37 years. From this time, the Cunard wharves became a great object of attraction. First, because the coutness of Harcourt came from such an immense distance, and second, because its cargo was all tea. The ship smelled like a teapot. It was a large vessel too, perhaps 1,200 tons, a monster at that time for any merchant. The precious cargo was stored in the commodious Cunard warehouse. As agent for the East India Company, Cunard advertised a public sale that would be held June 19, 1826, with all the tea open for inspection for 5 days before, and on the sale date, a printed catalog would be available. This would also be a major boost to his status in Nova Scotia, along with other provinces. In addition, he would make a wealth of connections in London during his time there, connections that would set him up for success later on in life. I really like to think of this as a younger version of Samuel taking care of an older version of himself. Plus, it also acts as a major insight for us right here that meeting and developing relationships in person can have major impacts in our business. In the book, it says the following: traveling about London, meeting and mixing with government officials and members of the British mercantile class gave Cunard a tremendous advantage over his peers in Halifax, who chose to run their businesses from the comfort of their offices in this distant port. The ability to listen, observe, and present himself to the London establishment was an advantage that he would exploit to the fullest and would ultimately set Cunard apart from his contemporaries back home who conducted their business through the impersonal and irregular postal system. It's amazing that 200 years ago, Cunard was not afraid to jump on a ship, sail across the ocean, and meet people in person, as he knew this was really important for securing the contract that he desired for his company. Just think how much easier we have it today. I mean, we can jump on a plane, work on a deal, and be back home in a few days. If Samuel can sit on a ship for 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even up to 12 weeks, one way to secure a contract, That should give us a great deal of motivation to book a plane ticket, go hammer out a deal, or build new relationships or cultivate existing ones. We should really let Samuel be a guide right here for you and I to keep that deep drive going, to expand out our businesses and push for greater things and build our relationships. The next time you're sitting in an airport at a layover, just think about Samuel, how he had to lay over in a ship for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. Let that give us strength that in modern times we're very quite fortunate that we can quickly book travel, jump on a plane, go work on a deal, and be back home. I find that incredibly inspiring for my personal life. I know I've been out on the road traveling before, and at times it hasn't been the most fun thing to do, but that just gives me motivation. If someone like Cunard can do this 200 years ago, use his deep drive as a fire to help propel him forward, then you and I, my friend, we can use that in our lives as well. Just super powerful. Let's see. So at this point, things are going to continue to develop for Cunard. And in 1826, he's going to find himself involved with helping a company called General Mining Association, or GMA. And what they were doing is they were developing coal mining fields in Nova Scotia. This really had a profound impact on his education, as they're going to be using the first steam engine in the area as a way to pump water out of the mine shafts that they were digging. For Cunard, this is going to have the following impact. Let me just read for you from the book here. Samuel Cunard, who perhaps reflected on the marvels of steam and the seemingly limitless supply of coal literally at his feet. Steam and coal for Samuel Cunard was present, and the future were drawing ever closer together. This innovative technology of the day, it's seeping closer and closer towards Cunard's purpose in life. I really like to think that the snowball is rolling at a decent speed, and along the way, it's going to add coal and steam to the avalanche that's coming. But before this, he's going to suffer a really great tragedy when his wife dies in 1828, giving birth to their ninth child, Elizabeth. Samuel is just devastated here, and he's actually going to take time away from growing his empire, and he's going to stay at home with his children. And this is a move I greatly respect. In the book, it says the following about Cunard. For the first time in his busy life, Samuel Cunard, ever driven by an unbridled sense of purpose and achievement, slowed down to take stock of his life and to focus on that which he valued more than anything else, his family. For the next 2 years, between 1828 and 1830, Cunard stayed close to home while his family adapted to the loss of their mother. During this time, Samuel devoted as much of his time as possible to his children. At this time, this was the right move for him. He puts his family first. His mother-in-law, Susanna Duffus, would eventually move into the house and take over the role of looking after the children while Samuel was away, and this really worked out well for him. For Samuel, he would never remarry, and he kept his wife in high regard, and he generally would just focus on taking care of the family and then growing his business. Slowly, he's going to reintegrate back into his business life, and when he does so, he takes notice of 2 new steamships that were in the area. Through his observation, he saw that they kept really steady speeds because they weren't reliant upon the wind. With that steady speed, he began to figure out that he could start putting parameters around delivery times, and this starts fitting perfectly into his model of reliable time between different ports on the water. Another major thing happens here is that the Canadian legislature, they're going to offer a 3,000 British pound incentive for anyone who could bring a steamship to the area to help facilitate the faster movement of goods between Canadian provinces in a reliable manner. This is right up Cunard's alley. This, of course, was enough to dip his toe in the water, and what he would do is he would form the Quebec and Halifax Steam Navigation Company along with 196 other investors. They're going to select Samuel to be the primary representative of the company on their behalf. Thus, they're going to commission and build their first steamship called the Royal William. This ship is going to be launched on April 27th, 1831, to a crowd of more than 30,000 people. That is a lot of people. I can only imagine being one of those people at the time, coming out to see the newest cutting edge innovation being put on the water going into service. Now, something important was really taking place here with the Royal William. I see this simply as Samuel getting his master's degree in steamships, and at the same time, I can really feel that he has the same spirit and curiosity right here as Sam Walton did. Let me just read for you here so you can get a sense of overwhelming desire and curiosity to always be learning. The ship was repeatedly visited by Samuel in Halifax. Cunard lost no opportunity to inquire about every particular regarding its speed, sea qualities, and consumption of fuel, carefully noting down all of the information obtained, which doubtlessly enabled him to establish a magnificent fleet of ocean-going ships that still bear his name. On the side of the page next to that paragraph in my book, I wrote Sam Walton. That was the first thing that popped to mind when I read that selection, as Sam was always visiting his stores. He took detailed notes of what his competitors were doing correctly, and then he applied all that good stuff to his business. For Samuel Cunard, same thing. He's learning as much as he can about steamships. This is really his education. Later in life, when he's building even bigger ones, he uses this information as a means to make them more durable and reliable. Just super, super valuable for you and I to always keep our eyes and our ears open in business. You never know what might present itself in the oddest of ways that we can use as an unfair advantage to help us grow, expand, or improve our services, or possibly even cut costs. The lesson here, my friend, always stay curious. You never know what you're going to find out there. And for Cunard, the best thing that he got out of the Royal William was the knowledge. As you see, in 1832, cholera had arrived in Quebec, and the ship would have to be placed into quarantine for most of 32, as many passengers aboard had been ill. And this is going to result in the holding company going out of business because they weren't able to generate any revenues from the ship. So the Royal William is going to be sold at auction to a new group of investors. But the story and the learning for Cunard is not done just yet with the Royal William. As you see, the new investors, they're going to offer up this steamship for ocean-going travel. And this was a bit crazy at the time because it wasn't really known if a steamship could possibly carry enough coal to make it across the ocean. I mean, it still had sails that they could use, but this was really a big test at the time. Most people thought it was simply impossible to fuel itself across the ocean, and it really made Cunard sit up and take notice. He took a lot of interest in this. So what would happen is that the Royal William would take off on August 18th of 1833 from Quebec to cross the Atlantic. They would have a total of 7 passengers. I guess they didn't want to take the risk either. And then they would have 36 crew members, and listen to this, 330 tons of coal. That is a lot of coal. And I just had to look this up to see if I could get a comparison on this. And I found out that one train car holds 100 tons of coal. So I guess that would be what, 3.5 rail cars full of coal. So the next time you see a train passing by, just check out, 4 of those cars. That was how much coal was loaded on the ship at the start. And so it says in the book, solely under steam power, they're going to arrive in England on September 12th for a total crossing time of 25 days. Right here, the Royal William, this was the first steamship to cross the North Atlantic from west to east under its own power, that of coal. And for Cunard, what would he think when he hears the news? Well, that is a great question. Let's find out. Cunard, hearing of the safe travel of the Royal William in London, was pleased but not surprised. Cunard was already contemplating how he could employ the innovation and technology demonstrated by the Royal William in his own plans for the future. The ship would become the template for Cunard's first transatlantic steamer, still years away. This was the year 1833, and Cunard personally owned more than 70 ships. He loved taking a hands-on approach. And this really reminds me of Sam Zamuri, the banana man that we covered in episode 9, who knew his business from A to Z in the following way. His years in the jungle gave him experience rare in the trade. Unlike most of his competitors, he understood every part of the business, from the executive suite where the stock was manipulated to the ripening room where the green fruit yellowed. He was contemptuous of banana men who spent their lives in the north, far from the plantations. Those schmucks, what do they know? They're there and we're here. This aspect of Zamuri matches up so well with Cunard. In the book, it says the following. Unlike his contemporaries, Cunard was very much a hands-on businessman. He enjoyed nothing more than sailing aboard his own vessels, whenever the occasion arose. Given the nature of his business, he had ample opportunity to sail about the maritime provinces and to cross the Atlantic Ocean. In this way, he was able to gain first-hand experience with wind, weather, and water conditions. Perhaps more importantly, he learned how both vessels and crew performed in all manner of conditions, and time spent during coastal cruising or ocean crossings, while arduous by today's standards, was never wasted. When he wasn't on the bridge, Cunard could be found in his stateroom turned office, fomenting plans for his next venture or attending to his correspondence. Throughout his career, Cunard shunned public speaking. He was a man of few spoken words. However, what he lacked in oratorical style and ability, he more than made up for in writing etiquette. Cunard had a writing style that reflected his own personality. He wrote what he thought. He did not mince or waste words. Like Sam Walton, and I know we've mentioned Walton many times on the show today, and I just feel that these two guys really are kindred spirits. They had the same mentality, and that's why I keep bringing him up. Walton was always in and out of his stores, talking to his employees and his customers, and he learned what worked and what didn't work. Just absolutely a first-hand learning lesson for you and I. I mean, if this worked for Samuel Cunard, Sam Zamuri, and Sam Walton, well, I think it's going to work very, very nicely for us. Always stay connected to the business core that services our customers. This is where you win, my friend. Now, if your job is working on the front lines, as you start to move up the business or you start to look at owning your own businesses, take note of your current position. How does it feel? Remember these times and use them later on as you talk to those who are working in those positions, and use that experience to build your connections. Always be listening and always be learning. This is what keeps us humble and grounded, and it allows us to think simple and keep a small family feel as we're building our organizations when you stay connected like this. And it's ultimately going to allow you to drive and build a culture, one that you can be really, really proud of, and one that you can grow long term, my friend, and have that firm stability in your organization or in your business. As Samuel Cunard was observing everything around him, he's going to find himself heading back to England with one purpose in mind, that of winning the contract to carry transatlantic mail. The race is really on at this time, because you see, the Royal William had demonstrated that crossing the Atlantic using only steam was possible, and it didn't take long for other ships to accomplish the exact same feat. It really reminds me of Roger Bannister, who broke that 4-minute mile in 1954, and most people thought that that could never be done. But within a year, 24 other runners had broken the 4-minute mile. When someone sets that first precedent that something can be accomplished, others are soon to follow on quickly. We see that in history over and over again. In Cunard, right here, he's starting to see this. Other ships are powered across the ocean under strictly coal. He really wants this Royal Mail contract. Many of these new steamship companies, they're built up overnight and they were focused on speed, and they were all trying to outdo the other company with bigger and fancier vessels. While this may have looked like a benefit on the surface, it really did them more harm than good, as a lot of these companies would go under due to unsafe ships that caught fire, or they had crews and they would navigate them into treacherous situations and they would easily sink. Now, for Cunard, remember, he had a really solid reputation. That snowball is massive now and it's rolling faster, and you can literally hear it from miles away. Plus, mix in his business relationships that he had cultivated over the years, and this puts him into a strong position here. Upon arriving in London, he is very well surprised in that one of those long-standing relationships with that of Sir Edward Perry is going to bear a lot of fruit. You see, Sir Edward had been promoted to the comptroller over the steam engine machinery and the packet service. And the packet service is a term that they use for mail delivery. So right here, we really see that Cunard, he has a super strong hand, and he's going to actually secure the contract with the Royal Mail Service to deliver the transatlantic mail, and they're going to pay him £55,000 a year for that service. Now, at the same time, while he's in London, he's also working out deals to build his first 4 massive steamships. In doing so, he's going to secure a contract with a gentleman by the name of Robert Napier. He was one of the best marine engineers in all of Britain, and he would agree to build each of the 960-ton ships at a cost of £30,000 each. Now, at this point, Cunard, he has 2 legs of his stool. He has a shipbuilder and he has a contract. What is the third leg of the stool, you might ask? That is a great question. The third leg is funding to build the ships. In order to get things off the ground, Cunard, he needed to raise capital. As the contract, it didn't pay until services had been delivered. Thus, right here, he has to go all in to get the company off the ground. So what he would do is he would form the British and North American Royal Mail Steam Packet Company. That is a mouthful. That is a long company name. It would later become shortened down to just the Cunard line. And this is the one that's still in existence today, more than 185 years later. Under this company, he's going to raise an initial capital of £270,000. He would bring on some prominent businessmen such as George Burns and brothers David and Charles MacIver. Cunard himself would be the biggest contributor with £67,500. Then they would take on an additional 29 small backers for the company, rounding out the funds that they needed. This gave him the third leg of the stool, thus building could commence of his first ship. And in the book, the author describes Cunard's accomplishments in the following way. This is a really nice summary. In fact, I almost use it for the show opening, and I just wanted to take a moment and share it here with you. Samuel Cunard had accomplished what no one on either side of the Atlantic Ocean had been able to do. His 8 months in England from January to August 1839 had produced spectacular results. During the space of that time, the quiet colonial from Halifax had found a builder and secured a contract for the construction of 4 ocean-going steamships, negotiated a mail contract with the British Admiralty, and then brought the whole initiative together with a group of highly respected and influential businessmen previously unknown to him, in the formation of the British and North American Royal Mail Steam Packet Company. Cunard's quest for an ocean railway was finally within reach. As things got started, Cunard's going to turn his focus to the building and launching of these new steamships, and would spend most of his time in London, as described in the following selections of the book. Cunard was in London throughout the winter and spring of 1840, so he could keep a close watch over the construction of the steamships. The ship upon which he was most focused was, of course, the Britannia, the flagship. Launched from Glasgow, Scotland, on February 5th, 1840, Britannia became the first in a long succession of liners that have proudly bore and still bear the name Cunard. The Britannia, although built plain in accordance with Cunard's wishes, was still a graceful vessel. It was 207 feet long, carried a beam of 34 feet, and was bark-rigged. It was capable of carrying 600 tons of coal to feed the ship's 3 furnaces that would drive the ship along at a steady 8.5 knots. Among the 60 passengers and 93 crew was the founder, Samuel Cunard. Cunard traversed the Atlantic from Liverpool, England, to Halifax, Nova Scotia, under steam in just 12.5 days, compared to the 12 or more weeks a journey by sail could take, and was making history with every passing moment and every nautical mile. The ship's engines and machinery performed flawlessly, driving the stout vessel along through sometimes rough seas and against strong headwinds at a constant speed of 8.5 knots. Samuel Cunard lived his dream of providing the world with its first ocean railway. As I read that, it just gives me goosebumps. Samuel had a vision for an ocean railway that would provide safe, reliable, and a timely service to deliver the mail. And he accomplished this feat one step at a time, starting at the age of 10, observing his surroundings, learning from his father, going into business with him, buying and building his first ships. He stayed connected to the front lines. He was always in the wharfs, in the warehouses, and on the ships, absorbing as much as he could. He built up his name in the community as a firefighter, a lighthouse builder, a noble merchant that was honest and fair. He was seen as a caring and loving husband and father to his children. As innovations took place around him, he was a witness to them, and he was a deep thinker about how to integrate technology, starting small with the Royal William and scaling up with each successful iteration. He built long-standing relationships in business with clear and concise communication, and he always adhered to his word. He never burned bridges, and he built an army of allies on both sides of the ocean. The end result was that his vision became a reality. And for you and I, this is simply a brilliant playbook that we can learn from Cunard. I hope that these lifelong lessons can make an impact in your business or your personal life and help you to grow your business or serve your customers even better. Cunard, he is such a great teacher for us more than 200 years later. Now, past this point in the book, the Cunard line, they're going to continue to grow and grow, and his focus, that of being on time, just continues to compound. It's really an unstoppable snowball at this point, and the results are going to be amazing. I just wanted to share a few passages with you so that you could get a sense of the impact that the Cunard line had on the world at this time. I really liken this to the impact that the internet has had on our modern times here. Let me just read for you. The impact Cunard and his first mail ships had on the intercontinental trade and commerce cannot be overstated. During the decade of the 1840s, following the advent of the Cunard service, foreign trade in Boston more than doubled. By 1850, import duties collected in Boston had increased to $5 million annually, sometimes as high as $100,000 on a single cargo ship. Cunard's new steamship service quickly established a spirit of goodwill between New England and Britain, arising out of the direct contact and tremendous expansion in trade between the Old and New Worlds. The new feeling of friendship also extended to the United States and Canada. In 1944, the American Congress passed an act authorizing the transmission, duty-free, of goods from Europe via Boston to Canada. This came about in part through Cunard's representation in Washington and would lead to the Reciprocity Treaty of 1854. It, and the role Cunard played in it, helped establish a mutual confidence between the two countries that has remained ever since as a model of international friendliness and cooperation. This really is a special time in history as two nations were brought together by the vision of Cunard. It's really a very special story in business history, if you ask me. One that can only be found through great books such as this one. The detail is so rich in the book, and I really hope that after listening to the show today, you can pick up a copy for your library at home. And remember that I'm really just covering the high level details about what made Cunard so deeply driven and how he changed the world and the lessons that you and I can extract and apply in our own business lives. For Cunard, he would eventually move to Britain as most of his shareholders were located there. And then most of his ships were also originated there. So this allowed him to oversee them as they were being built. What he would do is he would tap his son Edward to run the main terminus on the American side that was now located in New York. And then his other son William would run operations out of Halifax. On March 9th of 1859, Samuel Cunard, he's going to be given the title of baronet by Queen Victoria, and thereafter he would be known as Sir Samuel Cunard. This was a result of his willingness to allow the British government to use his steamships during the Crimean War, and the government, they were so extremely appreciative that they would reward him with this title as a result. Samuel would continue to oversee the growth of the company until almost his last days on Earth. The steam line would pass away at the age of 77 at 6 p.m. on April 28th, 1865, with his sons William and Edward at his side. He would be buried in Brompton Cemetery in Kensington. And just a big thanks to Samuel Cunard for leading by example, putting others first, and giving us a solid example of what a high integrity founder and entrepreneur can accomplish over the course of a lifetime, especially with that of following your word and a strict focus of being on time and showing us what can result from the compounding efforts. Just a deeply driven legend in business history. With that, my friend, I would like to just take a few moments to cover the top lessons that you and I spoke about today on this episode. Just imagine how these might play into your business to add some value or make it stronger for those that you service. Just one idea or even a partial idea can greatly change the trajectory of your business and where you're going and the things that you're doing. The first lesson today was focus on quality. Samuel, he put a lot of time and attention into making sure that his ships were safe, durable, and reliable. And he was strict with time. And we saw the compounding benefits that this had for him over the duration of his lifetime. Start small, build something of high quality, then start to scale. When we build high quality products and develop high quality services, this is going to be noticed by others. Like what Henry Ford said, quality means doing it right when no one is looking. Control your quality like no one is looking, so that when they do look, they'll be blown out of the water by your quality that you've put into your products and your services. And this is something that'll yield great results for us in the long run. The second lesson today, we saw that early in Samuel's business career, he was buying ships at auction and building his own. Through this process, he learned who were the respected tradesmen in the industry, who was reliable, and who was not. And he used this knowledge through his business career. He only worked with those that had the highest skills and those that kept their word. And for you and I, we can do the exact same. Look for vendors in our industries that have a solid reputation. Seek them out, leverage their knowledge and their abilities. Let our partnerships flourish and deepen our relationships with those that you trust. The third lesson today was around clear communication. Samuel wasn't an outspoken man, but when he did, he spoke directly and clearly. He was also a very strong writer, and he believed in crisp communication, and he didn't mix words. He was direct, and he set expectations up front, and this earned him a great deal of respect in the business world. We also spoke about Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines, who believed in heavy communication with all of his employees so that they knew what was going on in the business. And this bonded them together as a family. Sam Walton, he was the same way. He believed in over communication. If this approach worked for all three Sams in this lesson, then it will absolutely work for us in our businesses. Emphasize communication, communication, and more communications with your team. Only good things will result out of this. The fourth lesson was around getting out and meeting people in person. It can be real easy just to rely on technology, to make a phone call or do a video conference with someone and feel like that's good enough. 200 years ago, when Cunard wanted to guarantee that he could secure a contract with the East India Company to transport, store, and sell tea, he got on a ship and he went to London to hammer out a deal. Along the way, he meets a lot of new contacts that would help him over the duration of his career. And guess what? He won the contract at the same time. His mode of travel was 100, maybe 1,000 times harder than what we face today. Let this inspire us that we can spend a few days going out to meet others in our businesses, and let this drive us forward. Put efforts into meeting new people, developing quality relationships, and cultivating existing ones. The fifth lesson we saw today was about staying curious. Samuel Cunard learned as much as he could about steamships. In the book, it says that he lost no opportunity to inquire about every particular aspect, and he took notes in detail. And he uses these learnings to help him build bigger steamships and make them more durable and more reliable. Always keep an open mind in business. We never know when an opportunity might present itself for us to learn something new that can help propel us forward. Like Cunard, we must stay curious and always be learning. The sixth and final lesson here was about staying connected to the business. Cunard was constantly on his ships. He was working with and he was learning from everyone. He didn't care about position. He wanted to learn from you. And we've seen this so many times on the podcast. We spoke about Sam Zamuri, who was constantly on the front lines. He was working in the fields and in the warehouses, and he was on the banana ships. He felt that the only way to know what was going on in the business was to talk to those who were actually doing the work. Same thing with Sam Walton, who was constantly in his stores talking with and learning from associates and customers directly. The lesson: stay connected, my friend. Always be in the business, lead by example, and set the pace for your teams. And best yet, know your business from A to Z. Those are my top lessons from today. I sincerely hope that you really found some value in the episode today. And if you'd like to pick up a copy of the book, you can use a link in the show notes. And if you do that, that's going to be helping to support children's literacy, as I'm donating 100% of all affiliate earnings to help support that effort. That's something that I really, really believe in. It really has been a great pleasure for me to learn about the life of the steam lion, Samuel Cunard, outlining it for the episode today and sharing it with you, my friend. I thank you very much for listening. It really does mean a great deal to me, and I hope to see you back here soon. Until next time, make it a beautiful day in the neighborhood, my friend.